I gave Henry everything, my trust, my love, my life savings, even my dreams. I built his business from the ground up, stayed by his side through sleepless nights, stressful deals, and every moment when he wanted to give up. I sacrificed my own ambitions, my social life, even my family, just so we could have a future together. I thought we were partners, that we were a team. I thought he loved me as much as I loved him. But I was wrong. Completely wrong. It started with small signs I ignored, late nights that didn't make sense, calls he brushed off, distant smiles. I told myself I was overthinking. I told myself I trusted him. But the truth came crashing down one afternoon like a punch I never saw coming. Mia. His mistress. And she wasn't just some fleeting mistake. She was pregnant. And Henry had the audacity to act as if it was my fault, as if I was the one who had failed him. I felt my world shatter in that moment. Everything I had built, every sacrifice I had made, every ounce of love I had given, it all seemed meaningless. And yet, in that same moment, a spark ignited inside me. Because Henry didn't realize that while he thought he was winning, he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. And I was about to make sure he paid for it. Every last bit. I had always trusted Henry completely. I thought I knew him inside out, every habit, every dream, every ambition. I was wrong. Completely wrong. It started that morning with a casual text I wasn't meant to see. The kind you don't think much of until you read it twice. Can't wait for tonight, can't wait to tell everyone. My stomach dropped, and a cold weight settled in my chest. I grabbed his phone, my hands trembling, and scrolled through messages I wish I hadn't. There she was, Mia. His mistress. And the messages weren't innocent flirtations. They were full of plans, excitement, even pregnancy. My heart froze. Pregnant. Pregnant with his child. And I, his wife, had been completely replaced. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I stared at his side of the bed, the life we had built together, the photos on the wall, the stacks of documents and contracts that I had worked on tirelessly for his business. All of it felt meaningless now. I felt like a fool. Every sacrifice I had made, every sleepless night spent supporting him, every moment I had put aside my own life, gone. All gone. Henry walked in at that moment, smiling like nothing was wrong. "Good morning, love," he said casually. I looked at him, shaking, tears threatening to fall. "Henry, what is this?" I whispered. I threw the phone on the table. The messages glared back at him, impossible to ignore. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then he laughed softly, as if dismissing me. "Oh, that? Amelia, you're overreacting. It's not what you think." Not what I think. My world had just collapsed, and he had the nerve to call it overreaction. Not what I think? I said, my voice trembling with rage. "Henry, she's pregnant. And you didn't tell me?" He tried to explain, his tone patronizing, calm, like he was the one wronged. I felt the ground beneath me crack. The man I loved, the man I trusted more than anyone, had built a life behind my back, a life where I was completely invisible. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to disappear and never see either of them again. But a part of me, small, cold, and calculating, started to awaken. This wasn't the end of my story. Not yet. I remember the first time I met Henry. He wasn't rich, he wasn't famous, and he certainly wasn't the man I would have imagined would one day break my heart. But there was something about the way he carried himself, ambitious, charming, a fire in his eyes that told me he was destined for more. I wanted to be part of that journey. We started small, like everyone does. Late-night coffee dates, long walks, endless conversations about dreams and possibilities. He had a vision for a business, one that would eventually become Apex Innovations, but in those early days, it was just an idea scribbled on napkins. I threw myself into it with him. I worked long hours, researched markets, wrote plans, balanced budgets, everything I could to make sure his dream took flight. People often told me I didn't have to do so much, that it was his dream, not mine. But to me, his dream was our dream. I loved him enough to believe that building it together made us stronger. Over the years, I sacrificed more than I thought possible. I postponed my own career ambitions. I said no to trips with friends. I gave him my savings to invest when the company needed it, even when it meant tightening my own budget. I became the backbone of everything Henry wanted, and he knew it. Or so I thought. He became successful. Apex Innovations started gaining clients, reputation, and influence. He was everywhere, shaking hands, making deals, smiling for photos, while I quietly stayed behind the scenes. And I didn't mind. I told myself it was worth it, that seeing him succeed was reward enough. But somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't just his partner. I was his silent supporter, his invisible assistant, the woman whose sacrifices were expected and unnoticed. And yet, even after everything I gave him, he didn't feel the need to tell me the truth. The pregnancy. The affair. Mia. He built a life with someone else while I was still building his empire with my own hands. I remember sitting at the edge of our bed that night, looking at the papers I had spent months organizing, at the contracts I had fought for, at the life I thought we shared. It felt like a cruel joke. The foundation I thought we had, love, trust, partnership, was built on a lie. And that realization burned deeper than any heartbreak I had ever imagined. I knew, in that moment, that things would never be the same. And deep down, a small, dangerous part of me began to stir, the part that wouldn't let Henry get away with this. Not ever. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt like it had been crushed under a weight I couldn't name, a weight I wasn't prepared to carry. My hands shook uncontrollably as I stared at him, at the ease in his expression, at the casual way he moved through our home as if nothing had happened. How could he be so calm? How could he pretend everything was normal when I had just discovered the most horrifying truth of my life? The world around me started to warp. The walls of the house seemed closer, oppressive, as if they too were judging me for my trust, my naivety, my blindness. I tried to speak, to demand answers, but the words felt heavy and foreign in my mouth. Why would you do this? I whispered, barely audible, though I felt like I was shouting inside my own head. Every memory I had of us together suddenly felt like a lie. The way he used to smile at me in the mornings, the way he held my hand when I was scared about my future, even the nights we spent planning his business, all of it now felt tainted, like I had been living in a carefully constructed illusion. I wanted to scream, but the sound stuck in my throat. I wanted to cry, but the tears refused to come at first, replaced by an icy numbness that seeped into my bones. I began retracing our last few months in my mind. The strange absences, the calls he brushed off, the meetings he said I wouldn't understand, they were all pieces of a puzzle I had never wanted to see. My heart ached with disbelief and fury, a combination so sharp it left me dizzy. I felt foolish. Foolish for trusting him completely. Foolish for thinking love alone could protect me from the truth. Then came the questions that refused to leave me. How long had this been going on? How many lies had he told? How much of my life had he quietly stolen while I worked myself to exhaustion supporting him? And most dangerously, what else had he planned without me knowing? Sitting on the edge of our bed, my gaze fell on the documents scattered on the desk, the contracts, spreadsheets, everything I had touched, built, and protected. Each one suddenly seemed like a reminder of how much I had given and how little he had valued it. My stomach twisted, my chest burned, and I felt a bitter, simmering anger begin to take root alongside the heartbreak. And then, somewhere in that dark, suffocating pit of despair, a spark of clarity emerged. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was about power. About control. About making sure the person who had dared to destroy everything I loved didn't walk away unscathed. I didn't yet know how I would do it. I didn't yet know what steps I would take. But one thing became crystal clear: I would no longer be helpless. I would no longer be the victim in someone else's story. Something inside me shifted that night. The woman who had cried herself to sleep for love, who had begged for understanding, was gone. In her place was someone who had begun to understand that survival, strategy, and revenge were now the only paths forward. And I would walk them all the way. Sleep became impossible. Every sound in the house, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the clock, the creak of the floorboards, felt amplified, like a warning. I couldn't sit still. My mind raced, turning over every word, every gesture, every late-night call, every casual business meeting he had told me about. None of it added up. None of it was innocent. And I knew I couldn't trust him or anything he had said. So I started looking. Carefully. I opened the laptop he always said was for work only, scrolling through emails I had never thought to question. I rifled through folders on the shared drives, business documents, contracts, spreadsheets, anything that could give me a hint of the truth. Every click, every file felt like peeling back layers of a secret world I had never been allowed to see. And then I found it. At first, it seemed innocuous, a folder tucked away in a subdirectory labeled legal/private. But the more I read, the more my blood ran cold. Divorce papers. Drafted months ago. Clauses designed to strip me of nearly everything: our joint assets, my personal savings, even my share of the business I had built from the ground up. Henry had anticipated every move I might make, every argument I might throw, every ounce of leverage I might have. He had mapped it all out, like a game, confident I would never discover it. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the legalese. Hidden contingencies, staged signatures, backdated amendments, everything pointed to a single, terrifying truth: I had been living on borrowed time. He had been planning this for months, carefully constructing a trap to leave me powerless, humiliated, and alone. I felt the familiar swell of despair, but beneath it, something else was rising. Anger. Sharp, precise, cold. Every calculated step he had taken against me was now evidence I could use. Every underestimation, every assumption that I was naive, was a crack in his armor. I realized I didn't need to confront him yet. I didn't need to cry or beg. I needed to strategize. Carefully. Methodically. I had proof now, hidden in his own files, and it gave me leverage. The divorce he thought would leave me nothing could become the very thing that ensured he lost everything. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of control. The helplessness, the despair, the rage, it had transformed into something sharper, more dangerous. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was preparation. It was planning. And when the time came, he wouldn't just regret betraying me, he would pay for it in ways he couldn't yet imagine. I spent that night going over every piece of evidence, every financial document, every email, every text that hinted at his lies. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was calculating. Anger alone wouldn't win me back what I had lost. I needed precision. I had to think like him, anticipate his next moves, and stay one step ahead. I started with the finances. Joint accounts, credit lines, business transfers. I traced every dollar that had moved in the last year. There were patterns, subtle ones, small discrepancies that revealed his plans. He had quietly been redirecting funds to me as accounts, masking it as business expenses. But I found it all. I documented everything, screenshot by screenshot, transaction by transaction. Every move he had made against me became a weapon I could wield. Next, I turned my attention to the legal side. The divorce papers were only the beginning. Clauses meant to leave me with nothing were cleverly written, but they weren't foolproof. I spent hours reading the fine print, noting loopholes and weaknesses he hadn't considered. Every signature, every date, every ambiguous phrase became a potential advantage. I realized that the system, which he had thought would protect him, could be turned against him if I played it right. Then came the personal side. I needed to understand the full scope of his deception. I observed his routine, the times he was secretive, the subtle changes in behavior when Mia was mentioned. I didn't confront him, I watched and waited. Every careless smile, every whispered phone call, every tiny slip he made gave me insight. By the end of the week, I had a clear picture. Henry was confident, cocky, and entirely convinced I was too hurt to fight. And that overconfidence was exactly what I needed. While he thought I was broken, I was planning. While he thought he had all the power, I was quietly assembling the proof, the leverage, and the strategy that would make him regret underestimating me. I realized then that revenge wasn't about immediate gratification. It was about timing. It was about patience, precision, and letting him walk right into the trap he had built for me. And as I sat at my desk late into the night, drafting my plan, a calm, almost terrifying clarity settled over me. Every betrayal, every lie, every calculated step he had taken against me was now fueling the fire that would become his undoing. Henry thought he had won. He thought I was fragile, helpless, and blinded by heartbreak. But he had forgotten one thing: I had nothing to lose, and everything to take. Next I started digging the business. I spent hours at my desk, reviewing contracts, financial statements, bank transfers, and emails. Each line, each signature, each annotation became a puzzle piece, a thread I could pull. I traced the money flowing into accounts I didn't recognize, subtle amounts that had seemed insignificant at first. They were not insignificant, they were deliberate, carefully hidden. Henry had moved funds to Mia, disguised as business expenses, funneled through shell accounts and secondary investments. The audacity of it made my stomach churn. Yet beneath that churn, a cold, gleaming clarity formed. I could use every hidden transaction, every fraudulent maneuver, as leverage. I observed him. Quietly. Patiently. Every late-night call he dismissed, every hushed whisper when he thought I wasn't listening, every tiny slip of pride he made thinking I was unaware, it all became data. I memorized routines, habits, and patterns. I noted the subtle way he unconsciously touched his phone when Mia's name appeared in conversation. I saw how he overcompensated in meetings, smiling too widely, speaking too loudly, making others believe everything was perfect. But perfection is brittle. Then, one evening, while reviewing a stack of documents Mia had signed for medical appointments and prenatal care, I noticed something that made my blood run cold, then ice over. At first, it looked like a routine report, a standard checkup, but then a name jumped out at me, one that didn't belong. A paternity confirmation. A lab result hidden in the middle of a folder labeled confidential. I stared at it, numb. My mind spun. Could it really be true? I checked it again. And again. It was. The baby wasn't his. Shock hit me first. Then disbelief. Then, a surge of cold, calculated power. Every lie he had woven, every step he had taken to replace me, every plan he had for a future he thought he could steal, all of it was flawed. Fragile. Vulnerable. I leaned back in my chair, breathing shallow, my heartbeat loud in my ears. The feeling wasn't relief. It wasn't joy. It was something darker, sharper. The entire structure he had built for himself, his confidence, his lies, his carefully mapped out world, was now mine to dismantle. I had the key, the leverage, the undeniable proof that he had been playing a game he could never win. I envisioned the steps I would take. I didn't rush. I didn't act emotionally. I would expose the fraud, the deception, the sham of loyalty and love he had paraded in front of everyone. I would dismantle his empire brick by brick. And every time I planned a move, I imagined the look on his face when he realized it was over, when the man who thought he was untouchable realized I had been 3 moves ahead the entire time. The anger that had once consumed me had sharpened into something surgical. I wasn't just seeking revenge anymore. I was orchestrating a reckoning. And with the truth of the baby in my hands, I knew one thing with certainty: Henry, and the life he thought he had, would never recover. Not financially. Not emotionally. Not ever. I closed the folder, a quiet smile forming, almost imperceptible. This was just the beginning. And the world wouldn't even know what hit them until it was too late. I had waited. I had planned. Every lie Henry told, every transaction he hid, every secret meeting with Mia, it was all documented, traced, and transformed into weapons. I didn't rush. I didn't act emotionally. My revenge would be surgical, devastating, and undeniable. I compiled every transaction Henry had diverted, personal funds, company money, disguised business expenses sent to Mia's accounts. I prepared a detailed, professional presentation and requested a board meeting under the guise of a routine financial review. When the meeting began, I revealed everything: the hidden accounts, the misappropriated funds, the fraudulent transfers. Investors gasped. Auditors leaned forward. Henry's confident facade faltered, the room whispered in disbelief. His empire, built on my efforts and his lies, was crumbling before his eyes. The divorce papers he had secretly drafted to strip me of everything became my secret weapon. I hired a top attorney and quietly filed amendments protecting all my assets and blocking his attempts to seize control. Every clause he had counted on became a trap. By the time he realized, the law was already aligned with me. His plan to leave me powerless had backfired completely. I informed key clients and partners of Henry's mismanagement. Contracts froze. Deals collapsed. Investors withdrew funding. His polished public image, carefully cultivated for years, shattered. Every handshake, every smile, every word of confidence he had relied on now rang hollow. Henry's reputation, once untouchable, was now exposed as fraudulent and unstable. Next, I confronted Mia, not with anger, but with evidence. I revealed the paternity test: the baby wasn't Henry's. Panic overtook her. The security and wealth she had counted on evaporated. She abandoned him, taking what little she could, leaving Henry alone to face the ruin he had built. His mistress, once a pillar of his deception, became his first casualty. I quietly informed friends, colleagues, and business associates of the truth: his lies, manipulations, and betrayals. Every person he had trusted began questioning him. Allies withdrew. The social circle that once boosted his ego dissolved. Henry was left entirely alone, stripped of the illusion of control he had so arrogantly relied on. Henry sat in stunned silence as the layers of his collapse became clear. No money. No clients. No reputation. No allies. No mistress. Every deception he had orchestrated was returned tenfold, amplified by his own hubris. I watched calmly, a quiet storm inside me, as the man who had thought he could destroy me realized that the very foundation he had relied on, my devotion, my trust, my sacrifice, was now his undoing. The room was silent except for the soft shuffle of papers. Every betrayal, every lie, every attempt to take from me had been paid back in full. And the woman he thought he had broken? She was stronger, unstoppable, and fully in control. The morning sun pours into my new office. Floor-to-ceiling windows frame the city skyline, sparkling with possibility. Everything Henry tried to steal from me is now secure, flourishing, and thriving. Apex Innovations is mine, not just in name, but in vision, leadership, and influence. I walk through the office, greeting employees who once saw me as behind the scenes. Now, they see me as the strategist, the leader, the force that turned betrayal into opportunity. Contracts close. Projects expand globally. Investors renew their faith. Every success feels sweeter because it was built on resilience, precision, and the unwavering refusal to be defeated. Outside the office, life blooms in ways Henry could never touch. Old friends return. I laugh again, travel, reconnect, and rediscover joys I had sacrificed. And someone unexpected, a friend who admires my intelligence and strength, begins to walk beside me. Love isn't rushed. It isn't a replacement. It's a reward I allow myself to earn. Standing on the rooftop terrace at sunset, the city lights flickering to life, I feel the wind on my face and a quiet satisfaction deep in my chest. Henry is gone from my life. Mia is gone. Their whispers, lies, and schemes are now just shadows of the past. I am not only surviving, I am thriving. Every tear, every sleepless night, every calculated step has led me here. The future stretches ahead, limitless. Stronger. Wiser. Unstoppable. I have lost nothing. I have gained everything.